What is up, fight fans? This is the Fights Tonight podcast, and with me is my co-host Travis Plahamis. How you doing, Travis?
Pretty good, player. What's good?
Just trying to survive this heat. Pretty hot here in Colorado today. No rain, no nothing.
I hear that, man. I've been waiting for some storms.
Yeah, I tell you what though, it feels good to be in the house, outside the gym, with the AC on.
Amen.
Amen. Who we got fighting this
I'm
weekend, Travis?
repping that too. Well, it's a little bit smaller of a card. It's a UFC on ESPN, so at least it'll save some people some pay-per-view money. We do have some boxing cards. One big fight we'll touch on briefly. The main event is light heavyweight bout. Two guys in the top 10. Jamal Hill and Thiago Santos. Santos been around, obviously had his title shot against John Jones. Jamal Hill 10-1, pretty much has come in and gotten a finish in almost all of his fights, aside from when he fought Paul Craig, and Craig kind of surprised him, pulled guard, got a quick armbar, broke the arm, and Jamal Hill was just kind of still hanging out in there. It seemed like maybe he didn't really get the pain because of the shock, and then Craig threw a bunch of elbows and punches, and because one of his arms was broken, obviously Jamal Hill couldn't really defend himself very well, so it got stopped. But
Man,
since then, he's come back and had a couple pretty good knockouts, real long, tall, real good jabs and straights and stuff. So that should be an exciting one if nothing else. To start us off on the prelims, we have a pair of female fights, one at bantamweight and one at strawweight, both kind of a similar story. Maria Bueno Silva versus Stephanie Edgar is first at 135. Both girls got real look-alike records, and both have kind of traded some wins and some losses. Silva's a little bit more experienced as far as the UFC goes, but not by much. One of those ones I think is kind of a coin flip. One of those ones that you might be able to bet on it going to a decision or going past 2.5, depending on what your betting site puts your rounds at. But not really too sure on how that one is going to go. Next, we got a women's strawweight fight, Corey McKenna versus Miranda Granger. I'd say a little bit more maybe leaning to Corey McKenna taking this one, but again, both girls' records are really the same. Both only have 2 losses. Miranda Granger, though, does have a decent bit of experience and could pull off an upset, but another one that I wouldn't put too much on. That brings us to a fight. This one's kind of more the story of this card, where we've got guys with 10 fights or less that are basically undefeated going up against guys with 20 or 30 fights that have obviously had more losses, being at the top level more. This one is Jason Witt and Josh Bushido Quinlan. Josh is 5-0, but does have a decent amateur background. Was undefeated in all those as far as I can tell. Jason Witt, 19-8, been at the higher level a little bit more. Has had some tough matchups, but is a big guy for the weight class, fairly well rounded. The odds are pretty high on Quinlan taking this one, and from what I've seen of him, he should get it. He had an impressive finish on the Contender Series. Really nice knockout, but then it was either ruled a draw or overturned due to him coming up positive on a drug test. I don't know if that was an accident or what the deal with that was, but he's expected to win this one. On one of my more long shot parlays, I did pick him, but Jason Witt's one of those guys that could pull off a surprise upset.
I wonder what he failed the drug test on. I wonder if that was
Uh,
before weed got legalized in the UFC or if that was something
no,
else.
no, it wasn't weed. I forget the name of it. It was it started with a D, but it was like a drone or one of those kind of ones. It definitely seemed like this wasn't for partying. This
Oh,
was
okay,
for
like
yeah,
enhancing.
yeah. Now, could that have been in a medication he had to take over the counter or a type of supplement or something?
Right.
Maybe, but I always look at that harsher than, like you say, if it's a guy that fails for weed or cocaine. I'm like, hey, he's just partying. He's
Yeah,
not
he's
trying.
just partying.
Yeah, he's not trying to cheat. You know.
Right.
I think that makes a big difference. Are you trying to cheat or are you just trying to party on the weekend?
Yeah.
But So we'll see. Hopefully he can steer clear of that, and I believe that's the one no contest on his record. But I do think he probably comes away with this one. Up next, kind of a similar story where we have Brian Battle 8-1 versus Takashi Sato. Takashi Sato's 16-5, so almost twice the experience, but more losses. Sato's been around a little bit in the UFC. I want to say he's had about 4 or 5 fights, kind of traded wins and losses again. In fact, I believe he fought Jason Witt, who was in the last fight we just broke down.
Oh.
Brian Battle, though, pretty impressive guy, really tough. Kind of reminds me of that Ricky Turcos guy that was fighting a couple cards back. Just guy that's just not going to stop coming forward. He's another guy that, Sato's experienced enough to where he could pull it off, but you can definitely tell the momentum and the odds are going for Battle.
Yeah, I think I seen this Brian Battle guy one time on the Dana White Contender Series.
Yeah.
I think that was the same card with Craig Jones and Alex Volkanovski as his coach.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember who Volkanovski fought after that, but
Ortega.
Ortega. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I know he got some fans from that and has done pretty good since then. That brings us to a lightweight bout: Terrence McKinney versus Eric Gonzalez. Eric Gonzalez, I believe, has only had one fight in the UFC, has lost it, whereas McKinney came in, had some good wins, fought Drew Dober, and was really doing good for like a couple minutes there, and like was hurting Drew Dober, and then he kind of looked like he got tired and then got stopped, and it was only a couple minutes in. McKinney, I was reading it. It was something crazy. Like almost all of his wins, he's gotten in the first 3 or 4 minutes. So he's one of those guys. Like he comes out like a bat out of hell and either stops you or then he runs out of gas and gets stopped himself. Funny story about him. He had a life-altering drug experience where he was on a bunch of acid, I believe it was, and ended up getting stopped and ran after by the cops, and they tased him, and I believe it stopped his heart or something like that. He ended up in the hospital, but it's a pretty wild story.
That sounds like a bad trip.
Yeah, being on acid, definitely not going to want to run into the cops. It might ruin your buzz for sure. That being said, he's the biggest favorite on this card. He's a negative 900, which is pretty high for what you'll see on your average MMA fight. Some people think, he comes out and gets it done in the first round. Other people think that they took a step back from a guy like Drew Dober to fight this guy. I was seeing another betting site talking about this where they're thinking maybe they picked an easier guy and they're going to try to get him to slow down and get some more time because he so rarely goes to the second round. But we'll see which way he leans on that one. But I do think he gets it done, whether he chooses to do that slowly or in the first few minutes like he normally does. You gonna say something, Lou?
No, I wasn't gonna say nothing. I don't know nothing about these fighters again. I apologize to the viewers out there. I still have a hard time trying to find free time between training and between and my work schedule study these fights. Travis, he's definitely the clutch bucket. In this podcast. Without him, all of us wouldn't be making money. But
But Lewis is our technical guy, so without him, nobody would know. So we'll give him credit on that.
what can I say? I know how to use Google. All right, who's next, Travis?
Well, that'll bring us to the last fight on the prelims, which is Smiling Sam Alvey versus Mikhail Olexychuk. Sam Alvey, kind of unbelievable here. It looks like he's got 52 pro fights. He's 33, 17, 1, and 1 no contest, which is pretty wild. Olexychuk's got 22 himself, but it just goes to show you how much of a vet Sam Alvey is. He's been in the UFC for a lot of those, too. Kind of on a rough patch. I don't think he's won for a few years. Had some tough losses, had a draw in there, too. kind of a guy that's not really going to stand out in any one aspect. He's just kind of tough and has a good pace with his cardio and comes forward. Mikhail, on the other hand, a younger guy, definitely looking to finish the fight on the feet. And with the way things have been going with Sam Alvey, I think Olexychuk gets it done. He's also a pretty heavy uh, favorite to win. I believe they had him at -6 or 700, if I'm not mistaken. He gets a lot of TKOs too. Pretty well rounded as a kickboxer. So I definitely think he gets it done. The question is, can Sam Alvey use his veteran ways to kind of hang in there and make it dirty, or does he get stopped early? Even though the odds are kind of high on this one, I would definitely put Mikhail on any parlays just to help make a little extra. If your betting site allows it and you can pick him by a KO or TKO, it might be worth it to put it on there. That'll bring us to our main card. This fight had the only fighter to miss weight on the card, which was Ariane Lipsky, the Queen of Violence. She's going up against Priscilla Cachoeira. Cachoeira kind of started off rough and came in, lost to Shevchenko, a couple other fights, and then has kind of been coming back. She trains in Brazil, good hands, a little sloppy, but got a lot of power. Ariane Lipsky is decently well-rounded too. I'd say a little bit more of a grappler. She had a pretty cool knee bar a while back. Seems competent on her feet, but might be in trouble with Cachoeira's power, especially after the weight miss. You never know how she's going to come in. So definitely one I would stay away from on the betting. I will say, though, Lipsky could lose, and I would still marry her, if that
No,
means anything.
yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I didn't want to say it, since I already
Yeah.
say, this person's my wife, that person's my wife. But
So, I mean, she's always got that option, you
yeah,
know?
it's good to have backups. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
kidding.
Um,
Ugh.
that brings us to a heavyweight bout: Augusto Sakai versus Sergey Spivak. Both guys, pretty similar records: 15-4, 14-3 for Sakai and Sergey, respectively. Sakai was on a pretty good little run there, and then lost to Overeem, and has been kind of hit or miss since. Sergey Spivak's not a real exciting guy. Has had some tough fights where he got stopped, but is been pretty impressive. And even though he's not the most exciting, I was impressed how he was able to hang in there with some vets like Alexei Olenek and guys like that. Oddly enough, they both fought Tai Tuivasa. Sakai lost that fight, and Sergey was able to win. It was a while ago, but um, I don't know. This one I'm kind of torn on too. They've got Sergey as a 3-1 favorite. I'm definitely leaning towards him, but at heavyweight with guys that are this evenly matched, I don't know if it should be that close. Same thing with it going the distance or not. Both guys have been finished and get some finishes, but Sergey has a way of making fights kind of boring and slow, and he finds a way to win those. And so there is a chance of it going to decision too. So another one I'd probably stay away from. But if you do want something extra on like a big parlay, Sergey Spivak should be a pretty decent bet. Up next is the fight I probably know the least amount is Brogan Walker versus Juliana Miller. I believe they're both either first timers or maybe have both had one. Juliana Miller, kind of impressive to make it to the UFC with a 3-1 record for what it's worth. I guess it's probably a little easier at flyweight. Brogan Walker 8-2, so has got more than 2.5 times the experience. They both were getting a little heated at some of their face-offs and stuff, so it could be a good one. Maybe they'll be pretty exciting. I mean, they did get to the main card with them not having as much name recognition as Sam Alvey and some of those fighters. But one I would definitely stay away from on the betting unless you know something about them I don't. That brings us to an interesting one here at our last heavyweight bout of the night. It's Zach Pauga, I think the name is, 6-0, and I believe was undefeated as an amateur as well, going up against Muhammad Usman, who is the heavyweight younger brother of Kamaru Usman.
Wow.
Yeah, he's also a decent wrestler. Maybe not quite as good as Usman, but that's definitely the part of his game where he shines. Outside of that, not that impressive. His stand-up's definitely not that polished. I don't know if he's been working with Whitman and those guys. Um, Also on the ground, I believe out of the couple times that he's lost, one of them was by a rear naked choke on the ground. And he is an underdog for this, which is kind of surprising. Usually, with guys that are not that well known, if you have a brother or a cousin that's a UFC champion, it seems like you just kind of end up the favorite. But he's almost a 2.5 to 1 underdog in this fight.
And
Yeah, Paiga's a little bit thinner, a little bit quicker, a little bit crisper. Usman obviously a little more heavily muscled, could just take him down and hold him down. But I heard an old boxing trainer say this once, and he said, guys that are undefeated and that are in the pro game that are 10-0 or 15-0 or in MMA, 6-0 with 8 amateur wins would kind of be like a similar spot where it's. He said it sounds stupid, but they don't know how to lose yet, and so you're going to get a fight out of him. This isn't a guy that's going to hit the ground and just kind of give up and stuff like that. Obviously, we don't know a whole lot about Zach, but there's probably a reason he's undefeated, both in the amateur and in the pro career. This also, if I'm not mistaken, this is the finals of the Ultimate Fighter. They were both on a season. I don't know who the coaches are, but both of their last 2 fights said exhibition and said Ultimate Fighter, so this must be the finale of one of those.
wow.
Yeah, kind of interesting. So we'll see. I am going to go with Zach, although I can't say I've seen much of either guy, Usman either. Um, I probably should have watched some of that Ultimate Fighter, but even though Paiga's a decent favorite, another one I would stay away from, though, just because even coming off the Ultimate Fighter, sometimes those guys show up and it's a really even back and forth fight. Sometimes it's a quick stop. You never know which guy's going to go back home and get way better, which guy probably won't. So I'd maybe stay away from that one too. That brings us to the co-main event at welterweight: Vicente Luque versus Jeff Neal. This will be a good one. Regardless of who wins, this will be a good fight. Neal's a southpaw. Luque's orthodox. Luque trains with Gilbert Burns and Michael Chandler, and used to train with Usman. Recently, I believe he was Tyron Woodley's last UFC fight, and he dropped him, hurt him bad, came back from getting hurt, and then stopped Woodley with a Darce choke, which I can certainly appreciate.
That's your
Luque's
move.
got a good one. Yeah, they had it listed as a Bravo choke, and I'm not far enough along in my jiu-jitsu journey. I spend most of my time with the striking to where I don't know the difference of a Bravo choke and a Darce choke.
I didn't even know
But
Bravo choke existed. I wonder
yeah,
if that's
but
just
that
a fancy way of saying Dars.
yeah, or maybe it's like if you get it from a certain position or something. But that's what they had it listed as. To me, it just looked like a Darce choke. But and he's good in the stand-up too. Luque was on a really long win streak. Actually, both of these guys, oddly enough, were on really long win streaks, and then they fought Wonder Boy, and Wonder Boy beat both of them. Oddly enough, Wonder Boy since has lost a couple fights to Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad, but these were both guys as a Wonder Boy fan that I was like worried about. I was like, man, they're both on good win streaks. They're both dangerous strikers. Uh, Luque's a little bit more tough and comes forward with a nice left hook and nice kicks. Neal is a southpaw and really likes his hard left straight and his hard left head kick. He does have a decent right hook. That's why I'm kind of curious. I think both of their best strikes, Vincente's right kick and his left hook, Neal's left straight and his left high kick, I think are both going to land on each other. Um, Neal's a little bit quicker maybe, but Vincente is so tough. Every fight it looks like he's going to get stopped, and he's kind of got a Diaz thing, man, where he just keeps coming forward. Whereas since that Wonder Boy fight, Neal, I know he had some health problems and stuff. They've got Vincente as the favorite here, but if you are looking to build a parlay off underdogs, Jeff Neal would certainly be a good one to take. Although it's probably one I'm going to lean towards Luque a little bit just because I think they both get hurt, and I just think Vicente,
Too tough.
yeah, he's just a little bit tougher, and he's good at like really getting cracked and then immediately catching you with a left hook and stuff. Whereas Jeff Neal, I've seen knock a lot of people out with punches and kicks and stuff, but once he gets hurt, he gets a little bit tentative. But that's another one that I wouldn't put too much on. Whoever wins that too could be not too far from a title shot, especially if Usman wins again. Even though him and Luque were teammates before, that would be a bunch of good wins on a new win streak for Luque, and same with Jeff Neal, where it'd be a big win for him. So it definitely probably put you in that between 10 and 5, if not higher in the rankings at welterweight. That brings us to the main event at light heavyweight, which is Thiago Santos 22-10 versus Jamal Hill 10-1. Kind of like some of the other fights we were talking about, Jamal Hill is definitely the up-and-comer. Barely has 10 fights. His only loss is that armbar we were talking about to Paul Craig. Santos is big and strong and dangerous on the ground too, just not quite in the same way that Paul Craig is. However, unlike Craig, Santos has got a capoeira background, and I believe the first time a judge ever scored a fight against John Jones was Thiago Santos. It was a split. It was a majority decision, and one of the judges gave it to Santos. And watching that one, I thought that Santos might have won that fight against John Jones.
Man.
The bummer about that is the same thing happened with Gustafsson, and the same thing kind of happened with Dominic Reyes, where these guys get on a good streak. They fought John Jones. They either won or did incredibly well, went the distance, and then immediately after that, things just go bad. For Santos, he ran into Glover Teixeira and lost that one. He recently also lost to Magomed Ankalaev, who beat Anthony Smith last week.
Yeah.
He did get a decision over Johnny Walker, but Johnny Walker wasn't looking that good. In fact, Jamal Hill, I want to say his last fight was him getting a really crazy knockout of Johnny Walker, where they were both trading shots. Jamal Hill, who's usually a southpaw, switched right-handed and threw like a overhand straight right, and hit Johnny Walker in the forehead, and he kind of stiffened up and fell over really weird. It was a really strange fight. Hill's a purple belt, got a lot of power. Definitely fights like a tall, long guy. Kind of keeps it to his jabs and his straights and some kicks. He will throw the occasional hook. Santos, oddly enough, being the short, really muscle-bound guy, is actually the more dynamic striker. Santos will throw some crazy kicks, throw some really cool hook kicks and spin kicks. Got some interesting kick combinations that he'll do with that capoeira background, especially being built the way that he is. He actually, part of one of his downfalls in the John Jones fight was him breaking his foot by hitting Jones. I don't know if he caught an elbow or a hip or what, but he hurt his leg really bad and basically fought the rest of the fight on like a really messed up foot or ankle, or maybe it was his knee, I forget what it was, and then Jones started doing front kicks on it and stuff. They do have Jamal Hill as a favorite on this one, and I want to say it's more than a 3-1 favorite, which is kind of shocking because even though Santos is on a bit of a rough patch, he's got so much more experience, and he's fought such a higher level of competition. Jamal Hill did get that fight against Ovens St. Preux and did get a knockout, but it seemed like St. Preux was coming back kind of out of shape and unenthusiastic. And Paul Craig, who by no means is a top 5 light heavyweight, pulled guard and broke Jamal Hill's arm pretty easily, which I feel for him on the skinny arm thing. Yeah, I do think that Jamal Hill probably wins this fight. I don't know. He's got a lot of power. I don't know if he's got enough to stop Santos, and I definitely think he needs to be careful. Jamal Hill likes to fight. He's kind of got a Crawford thing about him where, like, he could be on the outside kind of boxing and moving, but he wants to step in and brawl and get the finish and stuff. And with Santos, that can be a little dangerous with the way he throws kicks and stuff that'll take your head off. It was a while ago, and Blachowicz wasn't fighting very smart, but Santos had just come up from 185, which is kind of crazy. He made that weight with how ripped he is, but he got like a walking away knockout on Jan Blachowicz before Blachowicz ever wound up being the champ at 205. So got to be careful coming in on Santos getting too wild and stuff. That being said, I do think that Jamal Hill gets it done. Real quick for everybody as a recap on a parlay. We're going to take Mikhail Olexychuk. We're going to take Terrence McKinney. If you want, you can add Quinlan or Battle. I don't know if I would. I've got Vincente Luque, and I think I'm gonna leave it. If you want to add Jamal Hill or Sergey Spivak, it might not be a bad idea. I've just been trying to not get too cocky with my parlays. Obviously, some decent. If you're just trying to take a chance on getting rich and hitting the lotto, you might be able to get lucky with some type of parlay with Usman's brother, who's a big underdog, Jeff Neal, who's a decent underdog, maybe even Augusto Sakai, and then finally one other one. If your betting site has boxing, I know some do and some don't. A good one to add on there would be not just Virgil Ortiz winning, because the odds on that are pretty heavy, but I believe he's a 4-1 favorite if you pick him to win by KO or TKO. And even though his opponent is undefeated, Virgil Ortiz hits really hard. And even though he doesn't always one-punch people, a lot of times the other guy's corner will stop it after 8, 9, 10 rounds. So if your parlay's not big enough, that could be one to add to it. And definitely if you're a fan of striking and boxing in particular, that would be a good one to catch on there for entertainment purposes. This definitely isn't the best weekend for betting. Not necessarily because of how even the fights are. You've got a lot of favorites and big underdogs on this card. It's just whenever you have the old veteran that's not quite washed up versus a guy that's good and surging but isn't that tested, and they're fighting the toughest guy with the biggest name and the biggest ranking they've ever fought, it can really go one of two ways. Any of these guys, Jamal Hill, for example, a perfect example where it's like, this could be his first huge win on a guy that was in the top 5 and that had title shot, or like with Paul Craig, he could run into some problems fighting somebody that's that good and been fighting at that high of a level for that long of a time. So keep that in mind with your bets.
That's it for the bet slips, huh?
Yeah, try to save some money for next week. We've got some much better prospect for betting next week. I think we'll be able to make a little more money, have a little bit more little more opportunity.
Is next weekend, is that the Cheeto Vera and Dominic Cruz, or?
Yeah,
Nice. That's gonna be a fun one.
Looking forward to that, dude.
Yeah. That's about it for this podcast, huh?
Yes, sir.
Well, before we go, you know, we have our coach out in Iowa right now, getting ready to do a
Yeah,
subspectrum. That's a hard word to say fast.
it is.
Tournament. He's going up against one of the ADC West Coast trial winners. So I want to give him a shout out and wish him luck. He just got his black belt, but he's the real deal. You heard Travis. He knew Boots was going to be great. Boots is going to take the winner of whoever wins against Terrence and Spence, I think is what you were saying. Well, I know Trevor is going to be a great black belt too, so keep an eye out for him. You'll be able to see his Instagram tag down in the the info below. But besides that,
Yeah.
you got anything else you want to say, Travis?
No, just he'll be weighing in tonight, and that it'll be a pretty big deal if he wins tomorrow. So anybody
Yeah.
that's following Flow Grappling and all that stuff, I wouldn't be shocked if you start seeing some pretty cool highlights of Trevor on there.
Oh yeah. I agree with that. All right, that's about it for the fights tonight, huh?
Yes, sir.
All right, deuces.